And then there's this idea of something that is tainted by a subjective personal bias, like it's subject to interpretation, like chocolate ice cream is better than vanilla ice cream. And they're basically trying to say that suffering is like chocolate and vanilla ice cream, okay? Like pain and pleasure are things that we could argue about what they mean. Like pain is really fun and pleasure is really horrible, or some kind of crap like that. So as soon as you interject the word subjective, they use it to say, oh, you're just having you've just misinterpreted chocolate ice cream. You're just making it up. You're just opining on chocolate ice cream. They've turned everything into some kind of idiotic, I rubbed up against it and got an impression, rather than let's sit there and take the world in, take the facts in, and describe reality. So if this was a trial, there's a difference between evidence, right? There's hard evidence, and then there's hearsay evidence, right? You could say. And that's the problem. You want to have something called that hard kind of evidence, not the circumstantial kind of evidence. And they want to turn everything into circumstantial evidence, meaning that, oh, that's only subject to your interpretation, and therefore I can ignore it. That kind of crap. And you should know that by now. And so, well, anyway, so he's just basically saying, okay, there's one subject who's having fun torturing 100 subjects who are being tortured. And, well, why don't we just get everybody's opinion? Everybody will agree that it's stupid for one guy to have fun harming 100 people, blah, 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 and everybody will agree and it'll be fine. Well, that's not what happens, because there's a bunch of people saying, I don't want to account for the suffering, because they're basically, the guy torturing is their friend, or is their politics, or is their agenda, and they want to rationalize an excuse for the 100 victims. So they'll just make the victims go away by saying they're just subjectively thinking they're eating chocolate ice cream when they're really eating vanilla, and they really are confused, and they don't know what they're feeling, blah, 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 blah. And I'll play the ending of this video, then I'll just repeat myself again.
Why do we need more? Why does the argument need more? Why would people need more?
Okay, I'll say it again another way, just to say again back to the trial example. Because he also implied that I'm doing this in defense of antinatalism. No, I have this problem in defense of animal rights. I have this problem in defense of almost every philosophical position, because anybody who loses an argument always bails to the subjective crap. They always bail to the, well, that's just your opinion. They always run away from evidence. And if they can taint evidence by claiming that's not a valid thing, that only happens 999 million times out of a billion. Bullshit. That's not an absolute truth. Okay, they just use these outs. And so you have to establish the existence of philosophy's purpose in the first place, even as a principle. So that's another argument I'd make. That in principle, I'm not doing what you people are doing. I'm not looking for mob rule or a bunch of people to agree with me. I'm basically saying philosophy is science. The idea is to come up with the perfect sentences describing the absolute reality of the circumstance. That's my ambition. I want to know the truth. I don't want to know some subjective crap. I don't want to know some conditional crap. I want to know the fucking truth. I can handle it, and I want it. And I want to have a conversation about the fucking truth and the best theories of truth people can contrive or make up or do any of that shit. So yeah, I want a truth competition, not an evasion competition.
All right, now I think that's brilliant. And I think this is where Gary really shines when it comes to this kind of an exposition. I want to clarify one thing quickly before I move on. Earlier, I was talking about these lifeboat scenarios where people say, well, rape isn't objectively wrong, because what if you could dream up a scenario where you could rape someone to save humanity or something like that? These are obviously ludicrous examples, because that's not how rape is committed, first of all. But second of all, the person then committing the rape is not the moral agent. in that instance, the moral agent would be whoever is saying either rape this baby or I'm going to kill everyone. And so you're talking about the wrong person here. The moral agent is the person with the option of choosing the moral evil or the moral good. The person engaging in raping the person to save humanity or whatever is engaging in comparative morality. They're choosing the lesser of two evils. That's not a moral choice. So I just want to clarify that. Getting back to the brilliance of Gary's discourse here, I think he quite effectively labels the problem here. And the problem is that people who decry objective moral standards and say everything is subjective fall back on subjectivity whenever it's convenient, whenever it suits. These are ideological arguments where we give a pass to our ideological friends, but we don't give a pass to our ideological foes. And to me, when it comes to these moral heavyweight issues, everyone should be painted with the same brush. The harm is objectively the same either way. It shouldn't matter who is the one committing the moral evil. And so I think, he does a good job of laying that out. Look, here, it's really simple, actually. Everybody is a proponent of there being some kind of moral laws, right? Like the people who say that morality is purely subjective, there's no such thing as an objective anything when it comes to morality, they still want moral laws, right? There's almost no one among us that are true anarchists. And I don't mean political anarchists. I mean people who just want anarchy. They're really, that's only a sociopath. Statistically, a very low percentage of the population doesn't want there to be any prohibitions on moral behavior, right? So everybody is a proponent of some sort of moral laws. The people who claim that morality is only subjective, they are therefore, again, forced to defend or raise as a principle that they base their moral laws on consensus and mob rule. And that's not a good base. See, you talk about a foundation, you need a good foundation as a base for any building. It's the same with moral laws, a civilization. Your foundation has to be solid for the rest of it to stand, for the rest of it not to be a house of cards. And again, the house of cards is very apparent. If you try to defend consensus, which you don't even have in most of the West anyway. There's not really a true democracy here because we've already recognized that that's not a good foundation. That all falls apart as soon as you change and shift the demographic. A lot of the very self-same people are really pissed off that Donald Trump got elected. That's the bargain of your democratic republic. That's the bargain of voting. I've made videos in the past where I've talked about democracy is actually, I think, immoral. For those reasons, because what you end up enacting as laws and dictates, mandates, don't have any philosophical principle underpinning them. A good example, and one that, again, Gary, to his credit, really, really speaks out heavily against is deficit spending. And that's one of my pet peeves as well. There's no good philosophical principle beneath that says it's okay, that it's not fraudulent to spend people's money without their consent. Possibly even people who haven't reached the age of majority, and possibly people, in fact, arguably, factually, people who haven't even been born yet. You've spent money on their behalf. There's no philosophical principle behind that, except consensus, mob rule. Everybody just goes along with it. Those are not a good foundation to build a set of moral dictates on. What is defensible, I think, is identifying objective harm and suffering and enacting prohibitions against imposing that kind of harm and suffering on other people. And I think the other reason that people don't like that is more of a political anarchism in a way, because what it does is it lays bare the fact that you really can only come up with a few prohibitions. But you cannot say that people have to do certain positive things that are unchosen. Again, no unchosen positive moral obligations. There's no good philosophical base. Again, this whole idea of a social contract is poppycock. There's no such contract. If there was such a contract, it would be thrown out of court for being, the terms are not laid out. There's coercion involved. There's no actual contract. There's no laying out of what the terms and conditions are of the contract. There's no acceptance of the contract. There's no negotiating, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's part of the problem, with objective morality is it limits people when it comes to some of the positive things, and I don't mean positive that they're morally positive, I mean the things that they would say you have to do, your positive obligations as a citizen sort of thing, mostly to do with the collection of tax money and what's done with that money. And again, the going down the path of deficit finance and all of that kind of thing. But I would say this is an area where Gary definitely gets it right. And even if you can't really prove one way or another whether morality is objective or subjective, I think when it comes to these moral heavyweight issues, it's far more defensible to say, listen, we can objectively identify harm and suffering than it is to say, well, we can defend some sort of consensus and mob rule, because there's no real philosophical underpinning to that. It falls apart very quickly, and I applaud Gary for, at least in this realm, being an objectivist. Let me know, as always, what you think. Thanks for watching.